Chosen one, pause for a second and feel that pull in your chest, that quiet pressure behind your eyes, that strange sense that something unseen has been nudging you all day. This message was erased before it ever reached you. Not once, not twice, 5 times. Each time it disappeared, it was because the timing wasn't right, because you weren't ready, because the weight of it would have crushed the version of you that existed back then. And yet here you are now, reading these words, not by accident, not by curiosity, but because something in you has matured enough to hold what's about to be spoken. You keep finding this message because it keeps finding you, and the truth is, you need to hear this more. Then you realize you've lived long enough to know that your life hasn't followed a normal script. From early on, you felt different. Not better, not worse, just separate. While others blended into the crowd, you noticed patterns. While others chased noise, you listened for meaning. And while others broke under pressure, you learned how to survive silence. That wasn't random. That wasn't luck. That was preparation. There were moments you thought you were being punished, moments you wondered why your path felt heavier than everyone else's, moments you asked why God seemed quiet when you needed answers the most. But silence is not abandonment. Silence is training. This message had to be deleted because the earlier version of you still needed the struggle. You still needed to be misunderstood. You still needed to experience loss that didn't make sense, delays that felt cruel, and doors that slammed shut right in front of your face. If this truth had reached you too early, you might have rushed the process. You might have tried to force outcomes instead of building endurance. You might have mistaken assignment for ego. So it was erased again and again until the version of you reading this could finally understand that not everything that hurts is meant to stop you, and not everything that delays you is meant to deny you. You are not behind. Let that sink in. You are not late, you are not forgotten, and you are not off schedule. You are exactly where you need to be to hear this now. The frustration you've been feeling lately, that restlessness, that sense that something is about to shift but hasn't yet, that's not anxiety. That's alignment. That's the sound of old cycles breaking down, new ones trying to form. It feels uncomfortable because you're shedding layers that once kept you safe but can no longer carry you forward. There's a reason you've outgrown conversations that once excited you. There's a reason certain environments now drain you instead of energize you. There's a reason you feel called to step back, observe more, speak less, and protect your energy. That's not isolation. That's elevation. When God prepares a chosen one, separation always comes before revelation. You can't hear clearly when surrounded by noise that doesn't understand you. Frequency. You've been tested in ways others would never survive. Not to break you, but to reveal you. Pressure didn't destroy you. It shaped you. Rejection didn't remove you. It redirected you. Betrayal didn't end you. It exposed what needed to be removed from your life. And every time you thought, I can't do this anymore, something inside you rose up and said, yes, you can. That wasn't just resilience. That was grace working quietly in the background, strengthening you without your permission. The message keeps finding you because you're entering a season where awareness matters more than effort. Up to now, survival required grinding, pushing, enduring. But what comes next requires clarity. You don't need to chase what's meant for you. You need to recognize it. And recognition only comes to those who have learned to be still enough to see. That's why life slowed you down. That's why plans fell apart. That's why timelines collapsed. You weren't being delayed. You were being recalibrated. You've probably noticed how people project onto you, how they misunderstand your silence, mislabel your boundaries, question your intentions, let them. Not everyone is supposed to understand you. Some people are only meant to witness your transition, not participate in your destination. Stop shrinking to make others comfortable. Stop explaining yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. Your calling was never going to be convenient for everyone around you. This message was deleted because you once looked for permission. You once needed validation. You once hoped someone would choose you before you chose yourself. But the version of you reading this has been stripped of that need. You've learned that approval is unstable, applause is temporary, and alignment is everything. You're no longer asking, do they see me? You're asking, is this true to who I am becoming? And that shift changes everything. There's a door ahead of you that won't open with force. It opens with identity. You don't walk into it by proving yourself. You walk into it by knowing yourself. That's why confidence has been forming quietly in you, not loud, not arrogant, but grounded. The kind of confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that comes from surviving storms you never talk about. The kind that comes from standing alone and realizing you were never actually alone. Pay attention to what's leaving your life right now. Some exits are divine. Some endings are answered prayers in disguise. Not everything that walks away is a loss. Some things leave because they've taken you as far as they can. Holding on longer would only limit what's trying to arrive. Trust that removal is sometimes protection, and emptiness is sometimes preparation. You are being repositioned quietly, strategically, intentionally. And that scares the part of you that likes control. But control is not faith. And certainty is not courage. The next phase of your life won't make sense to everyone, including you at first. You won't see the full picture. You'll only see the next step. Take it anyway. Momentum follows obedience, not understanding. This message keeps finding you because your discernment is sharpening. You're starting to see through illusions, through false promises, through energy that doesn't match words. You're learning to trust your inner signal instead of external noise. That's dangerous for environments built on manipulation. That's threatening to systems that benefit from you doubting yourself. And that's exactly why this season requires you to stay grounded, stay observant, and stay aligned. You don't need to announce your next move. You don't need to defend your growth. You don't need to rush your breakthrough. What's meant for you will recognize you when you arrive. And when it does, you'll realize why everything before had to unfold the way it did. The waiting wasn't wasted. The pain wasn't pointless. The silence wasn't empty. You are stepping into a chapter where your presence will disrupt old narratives, not because you're trying to change anyone, but because authenticity always exposes what's false. Some will be inspired by you. Some will be uncomfortable around you. Both reactions are confirmations. Light doesn't argue with darkness. It simply reveals it. So if you've been feeling the urge to let go, to simplify, to focus inward, honor that. If you've been feeling the pull to prepare without knowing what for, trust that. If you've been sensing that something is closing while something else is forming just out of sight, you're not imagining it. You're perceiving it. And perception is the first sign that you're ready. This message no longer needs to be deleted. You're strong enough now to hold it without fear, without rushing, without ego. You're ready to walk forward without needing every answer, without carrying every burden, without dragging the past into the future. What comes next will require presence. Not panic, trust, not tension, and a willingness to move when the moment arrives, even if the path ahead is only lit one step at a time. Because the truth is, the next part of your journey isn't about proving anything anymore. It's about becoming so aligned with who you were always meant to be that when the call comes, when the opportunity reveals itself, when the shift finally happens, you don't hesitate. You don't question whether you're worthy. You don't look around for permission. You simply recognize it the way you recognize this message, and you move calmly, decisively, knowing that everything you've survived, everything you've lost, everything you've endured has been quietly guiding you toward this exact moment we're staying. The same is no longer an option, and stepping forward feels inevitable because something deep within you has already begun to awaken, and it won't let you turn back even if you tried. And that stirring you feel right now is not asking you to be afraid, but to be ready. Because what's about to unfold doesn't need you to be perfect, it needs you to be present and willing to trust what you already know without needing it to be explained, all the way to the end. And as that awakening continues, you may notice a strange calm settling over you, even when nothing on the outside has fully changed yet. That calm is not complacency. It's not resignation. It's certainty forming beneath the surface. It's the knowing that you don't need to rush what can't be rushed. And you don't need to force what is already aligning. You've spent years in survival mode, reacting, adjusting, bracing for impact. Now you're being taught how to move with intention instead of instinct, how to respond instead of react, how to trust instead of tense. That shift alone changes the way the world responds to you. There were times you thought your sensitivity was a weakness. You felt things deeply, noticed shifts others ignored, carried emotions that didn't always have words. But that sensitivity was never meant to break you. It was meant to refine you. It trained your discernment. It sharpened your intuition. It taught you how to read between the lines of what people say and feel the truth behind what they don't. In a world obsessed with volume, you learn the power of quiet awareness. That's why you can sense when something is off before it collapses, and why you feel called to leave rooms just before they grow toxic. You didn't imagine the resistance you faced. When you carry something different, something authentic, something unmanufactured, it unsettles people who are comfortable wearing masks. You became a mirror without trying, and not everyone liked what they saw reflected back. Some tried to dim you. Some tried to distract you. Some tried to define you in ways that kept you smaller than your potential. But every attempt to limit you only made you more aware of who you were becoming. There were seasons when you did everything right and still watched things fall apart. That was never to punish you. That was to detach you from outcomes so your identity wouldn't be chained to results. You were being taught how to stay grounded even when the ground shifts, how to trust yourself even when circumstances contradict your hopes. That kind of inner stability can't be taught in comfort. It's forged in uncertainty. Pay attention to how your priorities have changed. You value peace over approval now, depth over popularity, alignment over speed. You no longer feel the need to explain your growth to people who aren't growing with you. You've realized that some connections were seasonal, meant to teach you something, not stay forever. And that realization didn't harden you, softened you. It taught you compassion without attachment, love without self-abandonment. You are learning that rest is not laziness, that pauses are not failures, and that waiting can be an act of faith. There is power in stillness when stillness is intentional. That's where clarity forms. That's where old noise dissolves. That's where you finally hear your own voice without interference. And that voice has been getting stronger lately, hasn't it? More confident, less apologetic, less afraid of being alone if that's what alignment requires. There will be moments ahead when you're tempted to revert, to return to familiar patterns, just because they're comfortable. Familiar dough. It's not mean aligned. Comfortable does not mean correct. You've outgrown certain coping mechanisms, certain dynamics, certain versions of yourself that were built for survival, not expansion. Honor the discomfort of growth. It's proof that you're moving beyond what once confined you. You may not see it yet, but your consistency through confusion has already positioned you differently. While others burned out chasing validation, you were quietly building endurance. While others rushed decisions out of fear, you learned patience. While others depended on external affirmation, you learned how to self-regulate, how to self-reflect, how to self-correct. Those skills don't look impressive on the surface, but they determine who lasts when things get real. The next opportunities that approach you won't come with chaos, they'll come with clarity. They won't demand that you abandon yourself to belong. They'll meet you where you are and invite you to expand, not shrink. And you'll recognize them not by excitement alone, but by the peace that accompanies them. Excitement fades, peace endures. You're learning the difference now. There is a strength in you that doesn't need to dominate or compete. It influences without force. It leads without shouting. It stands without needing to be noticed. That kind of strength is rare, and it's why your journey has been unconventional. You were never meant to follow a crowded path. Your assignment requires perspective, and perspective is gained by wall. King roads others avoid. Some days you'll feel ahead of your time. Other days you'll feel like you're still catching up. Both feelings can coexist, and neither defines you. What defines you is your willingness to keep showing up with integrity even when the reward isn't immediate. That willingness is what keeps you aligned when shortcuts present themselves. And shortcuts will present themselves. They always do when you're close to something real. You don't need to fear being overlooked. What's meant for you can't miss you. It may take a different route, a longer timeline, an unexpected turn, but it will arrive when you're ready to receive it without self-sabotage. That's the part no one talks about. Sometimes blessings delay not because you're unworthy, but because you're still learning how to hold them without breaking yourself or others. You've been shedding old identities quietly, the people pleaser, the over-explainer, the one who took responsibility for things that were never yours to carry. Let them go. You don't need to perform to be valuable. You don't need to suffer to be deserving. You don't need to prove your pain to justify your growth. Your experiences speak for themselves, even when you don't. As you move forward, your biggest challenge won't be external opposition. It will be internal doubt trying to resurface when things start to work out. You may question whether you deserve ease after so much struggle. You may feel suspicious of calm after years of chow. Allow yourself to receive without guilt. Peace is not something you earn by suffering long enough. It's something you step into when you stop believing you have to struggle to be worthy. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to choose differently than you once did. You're allowed to redefine success in a way that honors your values, not someone else's expectation. Growth doesn't always look like more. Sometimes it looks like less noise, fewer obligations, smaller circles, clear intentions. That simplicity creates space for what actually matters to expand. Notice how your reactions have slowed. Where you once felt the need to respond immediately, you now pause. Where you once took things personally, you now observe patterns. Where you once sought closure from others, you now create it within yourself. That's emotional maturity. That's self-leadership. That's evidence that you're no longer living at the mercy of every external trigger. You don't need to convince anyone of your transformation. Those meant to witness it will see it without explanation. Those who can't will eventually fall away, not because you push them, but because your frequency no longer matches theirs. And that's okay. Alignment is not about abandonment. It's about honesty. There will be moments when you stand at a crossroads with no clear sign pointing left or right. In those moments, choose what aligns with who you are becoming, not who you used to be. The past version of you made D. Decisions based on fear, scarcity, and survival. The current version of you is learning to decide based on trust, clarity, and long-term vision. That distinction matters. You're not here to repeat cycles. You're here to end them. And cycle breaking is rarely celebrated while it's happening. It's lonely work. It's misunderstood work, and it's often done quietly, without applause. But its impact ripples far beyond what you'll ever see directly. You're planting seeds in places you may never walk again, and that's still meaningful. The patience you've been developing is about to serve you well. Not because things will move slowly forever, but because when momentum comes, you'll know how to handle it without losing yourself. Speed without stability destroys people. You're being taught stability first. Trust that the clarity you're seeking will come not all at once, but in layers. Each layer will arrive when you're capable of acting on it without panic or pride. You don't need every answer right now. You need presence. You need awareness. You need the courage to stay aligned, even when old temptations whisper that. It would be easier to go back. You've already proven you can survive. Now you're learning how to live intentionally. That transition can feel disorienting. Survival has urgency, intention has depth. One reacts, the other chooses. You're crossing that threshold now. And if you ever wonder why this path feels sacred, heavy, meaningful in a way that's hard to explain, it's B. Because it is, not in a dramatic sense, not in a way that separates you from others, but in a way that calls you to responsibility. Responsibility to your growth. Responsibility to your integrity. Responsibility to the truth you've uncovered within yourself. You are not meant to rush this unfolding. You are meant to witness it, participate in it, and trust it even when it stretches you. The message wasn't deleted this time because you're finally able to receive it without fear, without needing it to rescue you, without turning it into pressure. You can let it inform you, guide you, and then continue forward with steady steps, grounded breath, and an awareness that what you are becoming is not accidental, not random, and not reversible, because once awareness expands to this level, there is no going back to unconscious living. There's only movement forward, sometimes slow, sometimes uncertain, but always intentional, always guided by the quiet knowing that something within you has shifted permanently and will continue to shape the way you see, choose, and move through everything that comes next. And as you keep moving through this awareness, you'll begin to notice how your relationship with time itself is changing. You're no longer obsessed with deadlines that once made you anxious or milestones that once defined your worth. You're starting to understand that timing is not something you control, but something you align with. When you're aligned, things arrive with less resistance. When you're misaligned, even the smallest step feels exhausting. That's why you've been learning how to listen instead of chase, how to sense instead of scramble, how to wait without doubting yourself. There was a phase when you tried to become what others expected because you thought that was the price of belonging. You learned quickly that belonging built on self-betrayal is never stable. It fractures you from the inside. So you stopped trying to fit into containers that couldn't hold your depth. You stopped editing your truth to make it more digestible. You stopped shrinking your vision to match the comfort level of people who weren't meant to walk the entire path with you. That wasn't rebellion. That was self-respect being born. You may still feel moments of grief for the version of you that tried so hard to be understood. Honor that version. It did the best it could with the awareness it had. But you are no longer obligated to carry that identity forward. Growth requires release. And release can feel like loss, even when it's necessary. You're allowed to mourn what you're outgrowing without returning to it. There's a quiet authority forming in you now. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that commands respect without asking. Shows up in how you speak less but mean more, how you choose your words carefully, how you don't react to provocation the way you once did. That restraint isn't weakness, it's mastery. Anyone can react. Very few can respond. With clarity, you're also becoming more aware of your energy, how it rises and falls depending on where you invest it. You're learning that access to you is a privilege, not a right. That lesson didn't come easily. It came through exhaustion, burnout, and giving too much to people who gave too little back. But now you know better. Now you protect your energy, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. The more aligned you become, the more your intuition speaks up. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it presses. Sometimes it creates an unease you can't logically explain. Trust that. You weren't given intuition to ignore it. You were given it to navigate spaces where logic alone can't guide you. The world will try to convince you to override it, to doubt it, to rationalize it away. But every time you listened to it in the past, it led you away from harm, even when it didn't. Feel comfortable in the moment. There is a reason you've been feeling called to simplify, fewer distractions, fewer obligations that don't align, fewer conversations that revolve around drama instead of growth. Simplicity creates clarity. Clarity creates momentum. You're clearing space not because you're empty, but because you're preparing for something that requires room to move. You might notice that old triggers don't hit the same anymore. Things that once would have sent you spiraling now barely register. That's not because you've become numb. It's because you've healed. Healing doesn't erase memory. It's see. Hangs your relationship to it. You can remember without reliving. You can acknowledge without being pulled back in. That's power. There will still be moments of doubt. Growth doesn't eliminate doubt, it changes how you handle it. Instead of letting it stop you, you let it inform you. Instead of believing every thought, you observe them. You've learned that thoughts are not commands, they're signals. And not every signal deserves action. You're beginning to understand that consistency beats intensity. You don't need dramatic breakthroughs every day. You need small aligned actions repeated over time. That's how trust is built. That's how momentum lasts. That's how transformation becomes sustainable instead of temporary. Some people will re-enter your life when they sense your shift. Be discerning. Not everyone who returns is meant to stay. Some come back to see if you're still accessible in the old way. Some come back because they sense growth and want proximity to it. You don't owe anyone access to the version of you that no longer exists. You're also learning how to sit with unanswered questions without forcing premature answers. That patience is rare. Most people rush clarity because uncertainty scares them. You're learning to stay present in the unknown, trusting that clarity arrives when it's actionable, not just comforting. Your path will continue to feel unconventional. You won't always be able to explain it in a way that satisfies others. That's okay. Explanation is not required for alignment. You don't need consensus to move forward. You need integrity. You'll notice that when you choose honesty over approval, life responds differently. The things that once felt blocked start to move. Opportunities you didn't anticipate start to appear. Not because you're chasing them, but because you're finally visible to what aligns with who you are now. There's a depth to your awareness that makes shallow interactions feel draining. That doesn't mean you're superior. It means you're selective. Depth requires energy. Energy requires intention. You're learning how to manage both. You are also beginning to see how everything you've experienced connects. The losses, the delays, the redirections, they weren't random events. They were shaping your perception, refining your discernment, strengthening your emotional resilience. You couldn't have skipped any of it and still arrived here with the same clarity. There will be moments when you're tempted to measure yourself against others. Remember that comparison ignores context. You don't see the full story behind anyone else's highlight. No one sees the full depth of what you've carried. Stay in your lane. It's custom built for you. You are becoming someone who can hold complexity without collapsing. You can feel gratitude and grief at the same time, confidence and humility, strength and softness. That integration is maturity. It allows you to navigate life without forcing yourself into extremes. As your awareness deepens, your standards rise, not out of judgment, but out of self-respect. You no longer tolerate patterns that cost you your peace. You no longer excuse behavior that undermines your well-being. That clarity may cost you some connections, but it will save you from losing yourself. You're also learning that your value doesn't fluctuate based on productivity. Rest is not something you earn after exhaustion. It's something you integrate to prevent it. You're learning how to move sustainably, not destructively. The future you're moving toward won't be built on urgency. It will be built on intention. You won't have to rush into it. You'll step into it when you're ready to maintain it. There will be days when the old fear tries to convince you that you're missing something, that you should be further along, that you should be doing more. When that happens, ground yourself in what you know. Look at how far you've come. Look at how differently you handle challenges now. Progress isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet stability. You are no longer searching for external permission to trust yourself. That internal trust is the foundation for everything that follows. Without it, no success feels secure. With it, even uncertainty feels navigable. Your presence is becoming more intentional. You don't just show up physically anymore. You show up mentally, emotionally, energetically. And that presence changes how others experience you, whether they can articulate it or not. You're not meant to rush this becoming. You're meant to inhabit it fully, to notice how it feels to choose alignment over impulse, to recognize the strength and restraint, to appreciate the peace that comes from knowing you don't have to prove anything to anyone. And as this awareness continues to unfold, it will keep guiding you in subtle ways, through quiet nudges, through shifts in perspective, through an increasing sense of inner steadiness that doesn't depend on external circumstances, a steadiness that allows you to keep moving forward without needing guarantees, without needing constant reassurance, without needing to see the entire path ahead because you've learned that. Clarity is revealed through movement, not before it, and that trust is built by taking the next aligned step again and again, even when the destination remains just beyond your current line of sight. Even when the journey continues to shape you in ways you don't fully understand yet, even when the unfolding feels ongoing rather than complete, because this process was never meant to be rushed to an ending. It was meant to be lived, breathed, integrated, and carried forward as you continue becoming. And as this becoming continues, you may start to realize that your sense of identity is no longer tied to roles you once played just to survive. You're not defined by who needed you, who left you, or who misunderstood you. Those were chapters, not the title of your life. You're beginning to stand in a version of yourself that doesn't require constant confirmation from the outside world to feel real. That's why solitude feels different now. It no longer feels like emptiness. It feels like space. Space to think clearly, a space to breathe, space to hear yourself without interference. You've noticed how your tolerance for chaos has dropped. Things that once felt normal now feel exhausting. Drama, inconsistency, emotional volatility, mixed signals. These are no longer exciting or familiar. They're simply misaligned. That doesn't make you boring. It means you've matured past environments that thrive on instability. Peace has become attractive to you, not because you're afraid of intensity, but because you understand the cost of unnecessary turbulence. There was a time you would overextend yourself just to keep connections alive. You would compromise your needs, minimize your feelings, and rationalize behavior that didn't sit right in your spirit. You don't do that anymore. Not because you've hardened, but because you've learned that self-betrayal always comes with a price. And you've paid that price enough times to recognize it early now. You're also beginning to understand that not every discomfort needs to be fixed immediately. Some feelings are meant to be felt, not solved. You've stopped rushing to escape emotions just because they're inconvenient. Instead, you sit with them long enough to understand what they're trying to teach you. That patience with yourself is a form of self-respect you didn't always have. The way you move through challenges has changed too. You don't catastrophize the way you once did. You don't assume the worst at the first sign of resistance. You've seen too many situations turn around unexpectedly to believe that the current moment is the final verdict. You've learned that setbacks are often redirections wearing uncomfortable disguises. You're becoming more selective, not just with people, but with thoughts. You no longer entertain narratives that diminish your worth or question your right to grow. When self-doubt arises, you don't let it take the steering wheel. You acknowledge it, then gently redirect yourself back to what you know is true. That internal leadership is something you earn through experience. There is also a deeper compassion developing within you. Not the kind that tolerates disrespect, but the kind that understands human complexity. You can see why people behave the way they do without excusing harmful patterns. You can hold empathy without sacrificing boundaries. That balance is rare, and it allows you to move through the world without becoming bitter or naive. You might notice that your goals feel different now. They're less about proving something and more about creating something sustainable. You're thinking long-term in ways you never did before. You're considering how choices affect your future self, not just your current mood. That foresight didn't come from theory. It came from living through GH consequences and learning from them. There's also a quiet confidence emerging in your ability to adapt. You've been through enough uncertainty to know that even if plans change, you won't collapse. You'll adjust. You'll learn. You'll find your footing again. That resilience isn't loud, but it's unshakable. You no longer need everything to make sense before you move. You've learned that clarity often follows action, not the other way around. So when something feels aligned, you trust yourself enough to take the step, even if you can't articulate every reason yet. That trust in your own judgment is something you once outsourced to others. Now it lives within you. You're also becoming aware of how much strength it takes to stay soft in a world that rewards hardness. You didn't close your heart despite what you went through. You didn't become cruel just because you were hurt. You chose discernment over bitterness. And that choice shapes the kind of future you're capable of building. There will be moments ahead when your growth feels invisible to others. They won't see the internal battles you've won, the patterns you've broken, the thoughts you no longer entertain. That's okay. Growth isn't a performance. It's a practice. And the results show up in your peace, not in applause. You're learning how to let go of urgency. Not everything needs an immediate response. Not every opportunity needs to be seized. Discernment is knowing when to move and when to wait. And you're getting better at reading those signals without second-guessing yourself into paralysis. Your sense of self is becoming less reactive and more rooted. External praise doesn't inflate you the way it once might have. External criticism doesn't devastate you the way it once did. You're anchored internally now. That doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're not controlled. You may find yourself revisiting old memories with new eyes. Situations that once confused or hurt you suddenly make sense. Not because they were justified, but because you can now see the lessons they carried. That reframing doesn't erase the pain, but it releases its grip on you. You're also learning that your journey doesn't need to look impressive to be meaningful. You don't need constant visible progress to know you're moving forward. Sometimes the most important shifts happen quietly, internally, where no one else can see them. The more aligned you become, the more you realize that force is rarely required. What's meant to be sustained doesn't need to be chased aggressively. It meets you when you're ready to meet it. And readiness isn't about perfection. It's about honesty. You're becoming honest with yourself in ways that once felt uncomfortable. About what you want, about what you won't tolerate, about where you've been settling. That honesty creates clarity. And clarity creates momentum without burnout. There will still be uncertainty. There will still be moments when the path feels unclear. But you're no longer afraid of not knowing. You've learned that not knowing doesn't mean not being guided. Sometimes it simply means you're meant to focus on the step in front of you, not the entire staircase. Your inner world is becoming more organized, more intentional. You're no longer scattered in as many directions. Your focus has narrowed in a way that feels grounding rather than limiting. You're investing energy where it actually matters. You might also notice that your definition of success has softened. It's no longer just about achievement. It's about alignment. About waking up without dread, about moving through your days with a sense of integrity, about building a life that doesn't require constant escape. You're learning how to forgive yourself for not knowing what you know now back then. That self-forgiveness is freeing you from shame that was never productive. You did the best you could with the awareness you had. And now that your awareness has expanded, your choices are changing naturally. The version of you that's emerging isn't rushed, it isn't desperate, it isn't seeking validation at every turn. It's grounded, observant, and quietly committed to growth. That version doesn't need to announce itself. It simply shows up consistently. And as you continue forward, it hit. is awareness will keep deepening, reshaping how you interpret challenges, how you invest your energy, how you relate to yourself and others, creating a steady inner foundation that allows you to navigate whatever comes next without losing your sense of self, because the most important shift has already happened within you. From here, everything else will continue to unfold in its own time, guided by the clarity, discernment, and inner steadiness you are still learning to trust more fully with each step you take. Chosen one, understand this now and carry it with you forward. Your journey was never about being seen early. It was about being ready on time. Every delay trained your discernment. Every closed door protected your future. Every season of silence sharpened your ability to hear truth when it finally spoke. You were shaped in private so you wouldn't collapse in public. You were strengthened in uncertainty so clarity would not overwhelm you when it arrived. This moment is not the end of your struggle, but it is the end of your confusion. You no longer walk wondering if you were chosen. You walk knowing you are aligned. You no longer chase validation. You move with conviction. From here on, your steps will feel quieter but firmer, slower but undeniable. What unfolds next will not need force, explanation, or permission. It will respond to who you have become. And when you look back one day, you will finally understand why this message had to find you now. Because only this version of you could receive it without fear, without rushing, and without losing yourself. You are no longer waiting to become. You already are.